Now, today's live call, I'm going to do a lot of whiteboarding with this and we're going to help you with this, but we want to walk through why Talent ID and the football IQ test is so important. Now, who is this for? Well, this is for players. Whether you're an aspiring player and you want to just maybe get a little bit better. Maybe you're an aspiring player who one day wants to maybe go and play semi-pro. Maybe go to places like the USA and do a D1 college. Maybe you want to play professional in Europe or the UK. Or maybe you want to play pro soccer in Australia, New Zealand, the USA, wherever you live in the world. So one of the main topics that is very well not understood, and one area that I think it's super important that we cover off, is all around Talent ID and what we call our football or soccer IQ test and why it is important. So hopefully guys, you're going to love this one. As ever, drop the questions into YouTube for me, and as the questions are coming in, I will flick in between to see if there is any questions relevant to what we're speaking about. And again, I'm looking for you guys to ask me questions for the end of the call as well, so we've got enough content to keep talking through as we work through. So what I will do is I will bring up my trusty whiteboard on here and we'll have a little look, and I'm going to walk you through certain parts of this presentation. Now, just as I connect and we get connected to the screen, fantastic. It's split into 8 to 10 sections. So section 1, and we're going to talk a little bit about the 1,000 things wrong with trial systems. Now, what I want you to do is to help me with this, especially on the live. Can you type in the comments, what are things that you've seen in Talent ID or trial systems that you think have been wrong? What are some of the examples you could give me that you've seen when it comes to pre-season, and maybe for you, your son, your daughter, you're having to trial? What are some of the things that you've seen that you think are wrong or you disagree with? Okay. Now, one of the big things that I can definitely contest to, and for anyone who's watching this for the first time and don't know me, my name's Raymond Wood. I'm not only one of the highest qualified football or soccer coaches on the planet, with over 26 different quals. I've worked in the game for many years, and I'm also qualified under UEFA Academy as a player agent, and I'm a player progression specialist. And to top it off, I've worked on one of football's biggest projects called the EPPP in the Premier League and the English FA, where we spent just over £2 billion on how to develop world-class superstars. So this is where my knowledge comes from. Do I claim to know everything? No. But I do claim to know 99% more than most after my 25 years of working in the sport and working in the industry. So when we look at Talent ID, okay, for me, the first thing is it's very subjective. And again, if you've got a different opinion on this, you can put it in for me. Now, what I mean, it's very subjective, and also it's very opinion, okay, based. And the problem with opinions, it's a good thing, but do we really want opinions when we have got our sons or daughters, or you as a player, your maybe football or soccer careers on the line, okay? When people look at you as a player, it tends to be what we call a short-term snapshot, which is wrong for me. And a lot of clubs and selectors, they base it on what we call select now. And what we mean by select now, it means like where the player's at right now, not where maybe the player might be in a year or 5 years' time. And one of the big things that I find, when it's subjective and it's not objective, okay, decisions are made by emotion over data. And this is where it all goes wrong for me. So when we're talking about there's 1,000 things wrong with talent ID. There's so much wrong with it because we need to look at different things, and I've broken it down into certain areas. But one of the things that I've seen, this is my snapshot over the last 25 years, and it amazes me that whether I go back to 25 years ago or I go back a year ago, I still see the same thing, okay? Players turn up to a club, at most clubs around the world, they'll get thrown into a game, they'll get given a bib or a jersey with a number on, and they'll get put in a series of games. And 9 times out of 10, the first thing you hear from those players when they come home or on the drive home is, well, how did your trial go? Well, it was okay, but I got played out of position for most of the night. Well, didn't you speak to the coach? Well, no, the problem is because there's another 100 players there, and the coaches are just trying to get players on the field and looking at them. And it all comes down to one thing. It's education. And what I mean by education, it's not knowing what you are firstly looking for and how, from having 100 players in front of you in a 2 to 3 hour period, how can you draw out what we call objective data, which is going to help you select players. But if we pull it back a level, what are we looking at players for? Are we looking at players for the now? And are we looking at short term? Or are we looking at longer term? And this is the problem. It blows my mind that under 10s and under 12s, clubs are looking at players based on where they are now. Now the problem with this is, and most of us will or may not know even, is things like what you call maturation. So when we look at something called maturation, what you could have is 2 levels. And when I'm talking about 2 levels, I'm talking about an age group. So let's say we've got 12s and we're looking at under 12s. We've got one boy, okay, who is currently this big physically and this tall. And then we've got another boy who's this big physically and this tall. And that's where their height and physicality comes in. But this player here, let's say player A versus player B, has already started going through maturation or puberty, okay? And this is one of the big mistakes that we make. When we're a technical director or a coach, it's because clubs don't know how to grade properly, objectively, and what they're actually looking for. And this is why it all goes wrong. Now, one of the things we're going to move on to, and I'm going to clear this screen, is the second part of this, is we normally look at players aged 8 to 16s for trials, boys and girls around the globe. Okay? Firstly is, why that age bracket? That's the first question I'd be asking. And why aren't we looking at long term? Why aren't we looking from ages of 3 years to 23 years and looking at a 20-year journey of a player? And again, it all comes down to one thing. It's the lack of education and knowing how to do it. Now, why not a long-term commitment? And we've just spoke about it. A lot of clubs think it's too hard. It's too much to cover. But it all comes down to they just don't know how to do it. And one of the main reasons is clubs go for the easy option. And the easy option is quick wins. And what does a quick win mean? A quick win means picking the biggest and strongest players and the fastest players at those age groups, because they'll literally physically bully their way through games and get wins, and it makes that coach look good and it makes that club look good. And one of the most upsetting things to me is the fact that they have a lack of a long term strategy shows a club or coach or technical director's weakness. And I'll be honest, it was one thing that I used to do in my 20s when I first started coaching, when I was first a technical director, when I was first head of football at a club. My lack of education on how to do this properly forced me into doing this the easy way and looking for quick wins and looking for results and looking for, our under 12s won 7-0 today and our under 14s won 5-1. Where now, what I actually gauge success and what does success look like, it looks like, how is Johnny or Sarah developing? And you know the problem with that question, and this is the biggest problem and the biggest question on the planet, how is this player developing? And for 99.9% of clubs around the world, they can't answer it because they don't have an objective-based talent ID program at the beginning, and they don't understand what talent ID actually is and what is the point of it. And I'm going to talk a little bit more and I'm going to build on this. So, if we think of something called the IQ test, okay, most of us all know what the IQ test is. And there's this myth that goes around when we talk about education and the IQ test. People think the IQ test was designed to see how smart or intelligent you are. Okay? And it wasn't designed for that. The IQ test was to see where your strengths lie. I'm just going to put a big S for strengths. And where your weaknesses lie. And I'll put a big W for weaknesses. Okay? And the IQ test was designed to identify strengths, identify weaknesses. Once you identify strengths, you know you need to keep working on them. That's a given. You can't just stop doing it. But the big thing is, if we identify, as an example, 2 to 3 areas of weakness, what can we turn weakness into? We can turn them weaknesses into strength. Now, when I worked on the EPPP project with the English FA in the Premier League, and at the time I was working for a team called Leicester City, we thought, how could we come up with a way to build an ID protocol? When we look for talent, we're looking for talent for this particular reason. We are looking for talent to see, if we imagine this as a graph, okay? And let's say we've got player A is here, and this is year 1, and this is year 2, and this is year 3, and this is year 4, and this is year 5. And then we've got the levels of being a football or soccer player. And we know at year 1, this particular player is there because objectively, we've grabbed technical, physical, tactical, and social objective data from them. Now we know by the time this player, let's say this player is 10 years of age there, by the time they get to 15 years, we know if their journey has gone a little bit like this, because we're marking it with objective data, we know that they're heading in the right direction, okay? The problem is clubs, 99.9% of clubs don't even know at the first touch point when they hold a trial, they don't know how to grade a player objectively, and this is the problem. So it all stems from the foundation. And when you build a pyramid, and when the Egyptians built pyramids, they didn't try and build this block first, okay? They wanted to build this block first, then this block next, and this block next, and then this block there. And how did they know that? They had a strategy objectively on what they needed to build it from the bottom up. And this is one of the things that I learned working on one of football's biggest projects. Now, we're going to have a little look at what happens if clubs committed to a player for 3 to 5 years. And this is what we discovered would happen, okay? You would get loyalty from the families and players. You would get no or less politics, because no one can throw at you as a club, well, we don't do ID properly, and every year my son or daughter's got to try out. Where if you're at a club that's committed to your son and daughter for 3 to 5 years, you know that they're going to be given a chance over that 3 to 5 year period to develop properly, and you're going to get some better data. There's a culture, and it's always funny. The clubs that have got the best cultures have got the best structures in place. Why? Because every single parent, most parents and players will get behind that club. And guess what? You get more wins long term. And this is what we discovered, okay? So what we decided to do in the Premier League was, when we done the EPPP, it had to be all about development over selection. And when we talk about selection, we were talking about the now. And that is the wrong thing to look at. We need to be focused on development. So guys, if you're following along with me on this one and you're on the live and you understand me, give me a thumbs up, give me a comment what you think so far. Now, one of the big things that we discovered as well, and there's never been a truer saying, fail to prepare, prepare to fail. If you don't prepare, you've got no roadmap or pathway for anyone to follow, okay? You've got no measurable progression. So you can't actually chart or speak to a mum or dad and say, this is how their little Johnny or Sarah's traveling. It makes you look silly. You've got no structure on a development model. And this is one of the worst things, having no structure. And this is most common in these countries. And people ask me, of all the countries I've lived in over the years, I've lived in Australia, I've lived in the USA, I've lived in the UK, I've lived in Europe, parts of Asia. I've spent most of my life living amongst all of these countries. Which countries have gone forward in the game and which countries have gone backwards from a development point of view? And it's quite easy for me to answer. The USA and Australia in the last 20 years have gone backwards in the game of soccer. And that's not just on the men's side, that's in the women's side as well. And it's really, really sad to see. But that's not me having a go at those countries. That's me just being honest, brutally honest. And it's all down to one thing. They don't have a roadmap. Now, number 5, and this is where it starts to get exciting. What happens when we build a player like a pyramid and we start from the bottom up? Okay? We identify strengths and weaknesses. We can design for the player individually and what we call a personalized program. Now, a lot of club TDs and coaches watching this will go, it's just too time consuming. I'm only a volunteer. I only get $3,000 a year. I already work full time. Trust me, this is easier doing it this way. And once the system's in place, it runs for itself. Okay? You can build a custom program for all of your players individually which increases, which we spoke about before, is so important. The culture at the club. And you've now got one of the best things you can have, and no one can argue with this. You start to get accelerated development. And how do I know this? Because I've seen it in action, and not just working at pro clubs in the Premier League. Clubs that I've worked at that have allowed me to put the infrastructure into place. I've seen this work firsthand, and it works amazingly well. Really, 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 really well. Now, this is where it gets interesting, and this is going to be more of an interest to mums and dads who might want to go running into your clubs, no matter where you are in the world, to talk about this. Or if you're a TD and you want to reach out to me, anyone can reach out to me through my socials. You can drop me an email, you can comment on any of the posts, and we designed what we call the Football IQ test. And where did it come from? It was inspired, apologies guys, it was inspired by the Education IQ test. It was designed to identify weaknesses and not label talent. Because this is one of the biggest mistakes you can make, is to label talent. Because I've never seen a talented 11-year-old. I've never seen a talented 16-year-old. I've seen an 11-year-old who was ahead of his or her peers from a developmental point of view, but I'm yet to see a talented 11-year-old. Okay? Also, with the Football IQ test, what we built in, and this was the game changer, was an objective assessment. And in this objective assessment, I can tell you, okay, where your son or daughter or where you sit based on your age. And the biggest thing I can tell you, which should be the thing that every mum and dad or player is looking for, is I can tell you what your weaknesses are and how to turn them into strengths. Okay? Number 7. Objective data versus subjective data. And this is where it gets even more interesting. Okay? Being told as a player or a mum and dad, your son and daughter is not good enough. This one doesn't just upset me, it riles my blood. When a club will say to a player that you're not good enough or you haven't been selected, then you would then say, okay, well, why? And then the club comes back and goes, you're just not what we're looking for, or you're not good enough. And this leaves a hole wide open for that particular club, because not many clubs on the planet can back up their answer by saying, well, actually, the reason why your son or daughter didn't make the top team, but they've been offered a spot at the B team or the C team or the D team, is because from an age point of view, when we've objectively tested them, for their development, they sit in the C team, which is the third team. They don't make the top team yet. Now, why is it important that your son and daughter goes in the C team? Because they're in and around players of their ability level, which means they're going to develop together. And that coach can target the development tools and sessions and teachings to help that boy or girl. But clubs can't tell you that. They just say they're not good enough or they don't fit in the style. One of the big things is when you do objective testing, you've got something called measurable benchmarks. And measurable benchmarks are where you're able to go, okay, Johnny's scored 121 and he's under 11. And on the benchmarks, it puts him inside the top 15 players. And that is why he is in the top team. Because it's more about development. It's not necessarily about being in the top team. It's being in the top team because that's where all the stronger players are currently right now in this moment. And that's where your son and daughter is going to develop. But clubs leave themselves wide open. Also, by doing it this way, it makes clubs transparent with standards. And no one can argue when there's an objective test in place, and that's how players are graded. And one of the big things that I see a lot, especially in Australia, it's rife with it. The tall poppy syndrome, the presidents, the vice presidents, it's quite funny how their sons and daughters always make the top teams. And I'm not going to name the club because I'm not going to embarrass them, but there's a club in Australia when I was once a TD, and I wanted to implement the objective testing for this reason, to remove bias, because there was a lot of things getting thrown at the current committee members of the club about their sons and daughters being in the top teams. And I actually got removed from post within the first couple of months of being there because they refused to allow me to not have certain players in the top teams because they didn't agree with the objective testing. So to put this in perspective, you've got a group of volunteers who know nothing about football or soccer, with all due respect, apart from being armchair supporters and volunteers. You've got a guy who's worked on football's biggest project, which has spent over £2 billion to produce some of the world's greatest football players currently on the planet. And they won't listen to me. They would rather have a subjective, opinionated model in place for talent ID because they didn't want to upset certain committee members, because if their son and daughter wasn't in the top team, there was a chance that sponsorship would be pulled. And that is why certain parts of Australia and certain parts of the US and Canada are not progressing in the sport, because it's run by a volunteer base. And when volunteers are involved, this is what you end up coming up against. And it should be all about one person in this. And the person it should be all about, it should be, if this is the planet and this is the universe and this is the player right there, this is the number one person who it should all be about. It shouldn't be about anyone else. And if it's in the interest of the player to have subjective testing and ID and trials, then it should be subjective. But when we talk about players as a whole, across a whole club, what is in the best interest of the players? 100%, you cannot argue a football IQ test which gives you objective results and feedback is the only way to operate a proper soccer or football club, whether you're a community-based club or you're an elite level or you're a professional club. Okay? Now, number 8, why it's powerful for clubs. And I don't know why clubs don't do it, and I know why, but it annoys me why people don't reach out to me, because I offer my help and support to clubs for free to help you put these tests into place so the players benefit. One of the main reasons why an objective football test helps, it helps you with pre, during, and post tracking. Now, why is that important? If we think about player reports, And the player reports that I see that go around soccer clubs all around the world drive me insane. It will have a mundane, subjective, opinionated comment from a coach about the player with no objective data in there. No reason why that player's got a trial again in the summer. No reason why that player has made it into the top team other than a subjective, opinionated comment. Now, can you imagine if you've now got a player who's got a score of 105 at the beginning of the season at pre, then they get a score of 108 during the season, and post-season they score 111. And the average score for that age group is 101. You can now back up your decision to put this player and keep this player in the top team. Let's look at it a different way. You got a player who comes in and scores 96 pre. They then score, as an example, 89. And at the postseason, they score 91. And the benchmark for the top team is 101 or 100 plus, let's say. You can now justify to that mum and dad, okay, why that player is now got to be maybe in what we call the B team or the second team. Can you imagine the power of having that at your hands? But you know as well, full well, that the objective data that you've got is in the interest of that player. Now, it might be because, unfortunately, and I'll give you an example, personal things happen. That player might have got a long-term injury. So that means for that player's development, it's better not to be thrust back in the top team with the physicality and the technical level being so high. It's best for that player's development to push up and will be pushed down into that B team. Okay? Now, one of the other things, it gives clubs and coaches what we call ends of season proof. And what is end of season proof? To say that you know as a club, you can grade every single player and show every mum and dad in the club why they're in a particular team, how their development's gone pre, during and post, and where they are at in the bigger picture. So can you imagine when you've got a professional club comes along to you, if you're a semi-pro or a community club, and go, who is your best player in every age group? And this is what kills me. We know full well certain players get picked not based on they're the best, but because it's the coach's son, or the coach's daughter, or the president's son. Could you imagine as a club, you've got evidence when that pro club comes to you to go, well, let's pull out the data. We can give you, based on where they're currently at now for their age, that this is not based on talent, but it's based on their development plans. Based on the development plans, these are the players that currently sit at the top of the group. Now, there's a good chance that Tommy, who's in the under-12s, he is at the top. But if you look at him physically against his peers, he's just gone through maturation quite early. And that's probably the reason why he's top of the group. So you're given an objective reason and opinion on it, and it's the best way to be. Also, what it gives you is what we call visibility. And what does it give you visibility of as a coach or as a club? It gives you visibility of what we call player progression. Now, people say to me, Ray, why do you call yourself the player progression specialist? Because I know I'm one of maybe 10 people on the planet who understand this properly from the bottom to the top. And that's not me giving myself a big ego. It's just actually having confidence and belief that I know for the last 25 years, I've studied, researched, and been on some of the biggest football projects and soccer projects around the world to understand this properly. I've wrote a book about it, okay? I've actually got a program that has got players from community soccer or football clubs around the world who followed my program, following these measures, who now are playing at professional football or soccer clubs throughout the globe, but mainly in the UK and in Europe. So that's why I know what I know, okay? And for me, the most important thing in all of this, it develops culture. And I could not think of anything better than being in a club Whether you're a community-based club in Southern California, in Laguna Beach, or you're currently at Arsenal Football Club's academy and you're a female player in the under-14s, I do not care what you say. The clubs who are the most successful on the planet have got the best culture. And I'm talking from the youth all the way through to the senior men's and women's, and the fans and the way they engage with fans. And I don't think you can argue, there's no surprise when we talk about the three biggest clubs on the planet are Real Madrid, AC Milan. I'm going to give you four. Bayern Munich and Liverpool. Now, ironically, these are the four teams who've won the Champions League, which is the biggest trophy you can win in club football on the planet. I don't care what you say, it's bigger than a World Cup. It's harder to win a Champions League than it is a World Cup, because the amount of phenomenal players in one team come from all different countries around the world. Real Madrid is made up of 11 international superstars. Bayern Munich is made up of 11, 15, 20 international superstars. So is AC Milan and Liverpool. Okay? But culturally, you cannot go wrong. Now, we're nearly coming to an end of this one. I'm just going to finish off. We've got a couple of parts to go. One of the big things about doing objective testing when we're looking at talent ID, and this is section 9, it's community and giving back. Now, we work and we offer to work with any clubs in the USA, Canada, Australia and New Zealand specifically, and we offer this talent identification protocol for free. We will come out and help your club run this. Why? Because we want you to get your families and players on a level playing field. We want you to build on a development first mindset. And the beauty about doing it this way, it makes it accessible for all players. And mums and dads will know, no matter where you are in the football or soccer pyramids in your country, they will know your club is built on culture. They'll know your club is inclusive of everyone. And everyone gets an opportunity at least once a year in pre-season to trial, to get objectively tested and to fit in where they need to fit for their development. And not one mum or dad will argue with you. Do you know why? They can't argue with you because it's objective data. And once you've got this platform to start from, the parents trust and love and know. And when you send out your offer letters, and most clubs now unfortunately do charge, when you send out your offer letters and your fees for the year, I'm telling you now, parents would pay double to be involved with a club that's built on culture and built on talent identification that firstly is fair, but is also objective, okay? Now, finally, most of you will know, because most of you are on the program, okay? The professional player pathway, the Soccer Pathway Pro that I run, okay, it always starts at the baseline. So again, the analogy I always love to give is when we're talking about a pyramid, we always start at the bottom here, block 1, and we go from the bottom up. When you're on the the Soccer Pathway Pro program with us, okay, It's always built on a personal plan for the individual. We have clear benchmarks for everyone to see. And can you imagine if you can submit your data monthly to your community group to say, for the under 12 boys, the average score on development in the top team is 112. In the second team, it's 101. In the third team, it's 98. So then you're being transparent with everyone. And how can you give this data? You can give it in community or social media posts because you've got it, you've got access to it. And when it comes to retaining players at the end of the year and keeping players on, you're committing to players within your ecosystem. And my advice would be for 3 to 5 years. But what you're saying to the parents is, in year one, they might have made the number one team. Okay, so in year one, they've made the number one team. But in year two, they might have dropped down to the third team. And then in year three, they might be back in the top team. And in year four, when they've just hit puberty and maturation, they may have dropped down to the fourth team. And then by year five, they're now back in the second team. But what you're doing is you're committing to that family that no matter where you grade them objectively, there's always a spot for them to be here. There's always an opportunity. And that is the beauty of doing it this way. And one of the big things to finish off with, it removes the guesswork. And there's nothing worse. And I've been there and done it. We sit there in front of mums and dads in pre-season or at the end of the season and saying your son and daughter's got to come back and trial again, or we're not going to keep them on. And they say, why not? And then we start with the communication, I call it babble, the rubbish, the words that come out is just backed off subjective opinions, and you haven't got a real answer. Can you imagine it being at a club? You've already got your letters done for all of your players to say, yeah, you know you're already currently with us on a 3 to 5 year development plan, but just to let you know, you're going to come back in pre-season. We need to get one more objective piece of data from you. As it stands currently, you're still in the top team, but that may change when we come into pre-season, not because Tommy, who's a painter and decorator, who's a new volunteer coach, who's now sponsoring the club for $10,000, now needs his son in the top team. It's backed up objective data. Now, to finish off and close this one off, do we need on this particular one, do we need, with all respect, like superstar coaches? Do we need coaches who've worked in the Premier League to do this objective testing? No. You just need a structure and a strategy. And once you've got the structure and the strategy in place, you can then get volunteer coaches to run this for you. And in turn, your volunteer coaches and technical directors are going to look phenomenal because the data can't be argued. It cannot be disputed. Now, if you're probably wondering how long does it take to do one of these, I'm going to give you a very quick explainer before we go to the next part of our live call here today. But you would need, with a group of 16 or 18 players in a squad, one coach could grade the whole squad of players in around about 50 to 60 minutes. So could you imagine if over a 3-week period you run this test over 3 weeks? That way you're throwing out all the excuses of, oh, my son was sick on the night you done it, he didn't sleep well, unfortunately his nan passed away and we went to a funeral that day and he wasn't in a great mood. So what you could do is for 4 weeks, you could run this for 4 weeks, give it to the coaches, they run it for 4 weeks, you get 4 test scores, and then you equal out an average score on that player. So if they've scored 100, then they get 100 again, then they get 90, and then 90, well, the average is going to be 95, okay? And that way, there's no arguments or two ways about it. That's currently where they sit on their testing protocol. When you then input the 100 test scores for the 100 players who play in the under 14s girls within your club, you know who the top 15 players are based off that objective testing. Now, there is certain factors that need to come into play. Okay, you need a goalkeeper. You need, players to play on the pitch who are playing outfield. But if you're dealing with players who are 14s and below, it shouldn't be about positions. It should be about developing players in multiple positions, excluding probably goalkeepers. Okay, so it's just going to give you also that piece of paper and that evidence and data when you've got to go to a mum or dad to say they're not in the top team anymore, or they're not in the second team, they've got to be in the third team. There's no argument about it. And then when they go, okay, what have they got to do to get better and to get back in to that next level, into that team? Well, I'm going to show you very quickly before we go. And I'll just do a little bit of magic on here, and I'll just share it with you what you need to do. What you would do is you then build them a plan. And when you build them a plan, and when you're looking at the plan for them, if you're currently on our Soccer Pathway Pro with us, what you would do is within the classroom, one of the things you would give the feedback would be, you need to work on your football objectives. Well, where are the football objectives? It's in section 5. Also, you need to go in the football blueprint. I've got a little bit of concern, maybe it could be to do with sleep. So within the football blueprint, you can log sleep, but also you need to follow your 4 turns and your 4 dribbles. And also they need to work technically a bit more, because where they're falling down at the moment is the technical aspects of the game. Where can we get that? It's inside the football blueprint. So when you go in the football blueprint, it's all in for you. So this will show you and give you the ability to be able to, as a club, to be able to direct players where they need to go to get better. And that is the beauty on having objective testing. Now, if you're part of a club, or you're a mum and dad, or you're a player, and you've enjoyed this section and this part of the call, and you think, yeah, I'd love this at my club, I'd love you to come and visit us. Guys, I'm serious. Wherever you are in the world, USA, Canada, Oz, New Zealand, wherever you are, get your club to reach out to me. If they're absolutely serious about doing it and doing it properly, I would come to a club and run this for free to help a club put it into place. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed that. We are going to go